Hi, my name's Kelsey. You ever walk into a place you helped build, only to be treated like you don't belong? My sister told the front desk I was the water delivery girl at my own job interview. But that wasn't even the worst part. They erased my name from the company's history, lied about who I was, laughed when I tried to speak. So how did I end up with the CEO bowing and calling me Chairwoman? I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was trying to impress anyone. God knows I stopped caring about that a long time ago. But because I needed a moment. A moment to stand outside the steel and glass tower that once bore my blueprint, to look up at the name Vireo Capital and remember what it had taken from me. Seattle mornings in October aren't loud. They're hushed by mist, heavy with the quiet chill that sinks into your sleeves. I wrapped my fingers around the straps of my canvas bag, not tight, just firm enough to remind myself I was still here, still standing. They didn't know I was coming. That was the point. I wasn't there to get a job. I was there to see if the system I helped build still recognized the difference between merit and manipulation. 10 years ago, I was one of the architects of Vireo's first-tier recruitment protocol. Anonymous case evaluations, blind hiring panels, ethics audits. All dismantled the year my sister Alexia took over operations, and now here I was. Uninvited, but not unwelcome. Not if they played by the rules. Inside, the lobby buzzed with that corporate kind of cleanliness. Glass, chrome, filtered air that smells faintly of ambition. I walked in quietly, flat shoes, neutral linen shirt, hair tied back, no statement jewelry, no perfume, just me. The woman at the reception desk looked up from her monitor and blinked twice. "You're with the drink delivery, right?" she asked. "Your sister said bring it straight to the 5th floor boardroom. They're already waiting." I stared at her for half a second longer than I should have. Not out of shock, more like confirmation. Alexia didn't just expect me to show up. She planned for it. Humiliation was part of the schedule. I gave the receptionist a short nod. "Sure, 5th floor." A guy in a slim navy suit, leaning against the wall, let out a stifled laugh. "That the new intern dress code?" he whispered to the woman beside him, eyes flicking to my flats. I kept walking. I wasn't there to correct anyone. The boardroom was upstairs, but before that, I moved to the east hallway where the printed interview roster was taped to a black clipboard. Just names, roles, check-in times. There it was. Kelsey Royce, Assistant Liaison, unpaid. Unpaid. I closed my eyes for a breath. My original application had been for Senior Strategy Advisor. I submitted it under a pseudonym, like the system demanded. But someone who knew damn well who I was, had found it, altered it, and downgraded me to a coffee-fetching nobody. "Looks like someone slipped through the cracks," a voice murmured behind me. I didn't turn around. This wasn't new, just newer packaging. Alexia used to do this when we were kids. She'd sign up for debate club. I'd try to join. Then suddenly I'd be listed as support staff. She'd lead, I'd carry the chairs. When we were 16, I won a National Economics Award. Somehow the local paper ran her photo instead of mine. Mom said, "It's just a mix-up." But the caption under that photo read, "Future CEO." Funny how often mix-ups benefit the same people. Eventually, I stopped fixing the narrative, stopped correcting people when they said Alexia had been valedictorian, or when they credited her with the sustainability report I wrote during our internship in DC. The more I stayed quiet, the less they saw me, until I wasn't there at all. I took a breath and turned toward the interview hall. Rows of chairs, canned jazz playing overhead, candidates fidgeting with resume folders like they were holding golden tickets. I took the only seat left, far side, near the water cooler. The chair legs wobbled slightly on the tile. The receptionist glanced over, her mouth twisted like she'd just tasted sour milk. One of the applicants, a man with gelled hair and an overly bright tie, raised an eyebrow at me. "Hey," he called out across the row. "Are you the one bringing lunch too, or just drinks today?" Laughter from the others. It wasn't loud, just sharp. I didn't answer, just held the handle of my canvas bag a little tighter. Inside that bag was a printed copy of my original hiring framework for Vireo, a copy of my degree from Wharton, a signed letter from one of the co-founders thanking me for designing the company's first scalable recruitment rubric. None of that mattered today. Not here, not to them. Because today, I was just the woman delivering water to a building I once helped raise. They didn't just misname me, they misremembered everything I ever was. I didn't flinch. Not when the guy asked if I was bringing lunch. Not when the others laughed. I just sat down like I had every right to be there, which of course I did, even if they didn't see it. The receptionist returned a minute later with a plastic name tag. "Here," she said, with that same insincere, tight smile people use when they think you've wandered into the wrong place, but don't want to be rude enough to say it out loud. "You're at the end of the hall, seat 23. I stood and followed the signs. It didn't take long to realize where they were putting me. Not the middle section, where the sleek monitors glowed softly and the other candidates sat poised in tailored jackets. No, I was guided all the way down, past the framed mission statements, to the folding chair parked next to the cleaning closet, just across from the staff bathrooms. The air here smelled like disinfectant and lemon-scented hand soap. Every time someone walked out of the restroom, the door would creak, then hiss shut with that automatic closer they install in cheap office buildings. The chair wobbled slightly, uneven on one side. Still, I sat. A guy a few rows ahead noticed and leaned toward the woman beside him. "Looks like they're seating the temps over there." The woman laughed. "Or the backup plans. She must have gotten the last-minute call." I pulled out my notebook and clicked my pen once. Just once. The sound cut through the hallway like a slap. That's the thing people don't get. Silence doesn't always mean you're ashamed. Sometimes it's the only shield you have left when everything else has been stolen. I opened my notes. Pages of hand-sketched frameworks. Ideas that would eventually be stolen, repackaged, and passed off as innovation by people like Alexia. But they were mine. Still are. Even if no one else remembers. A soft rustle behind me made me glance sideways. Two women hunched over a phone, whispering and laughing. I didn't think much of it until I heard the buzz of an incoming message and saw it flash briefly across the screen. Alt roster 3 new messages. I knew that Slack channel name. It was internal. It was private. It was run by Alexia's team. One of the women turned her phone slightly, not realizing I could see. And there it was, a candid shot of me, taken right here, in this hallway. I was mid-blink, the worst kind of photo, face soft, defenseless, unaware. The caption read, "Miss Backup Plan reporting for mop duty, posted by Alexia.mod. My jaw didn't tighten. My spine didn't stiffen. I just blinked once. Let it settle. Of course it was her. The thing about Alexia, what makes her dangerous, is that she doesn't scream, doesn't threaten. She smiles while she deletes you. This wasn't new. Years ago, we'd had brunch with our parents at the Colonial House. Alexia ordered Eggs Benedict and casually dropped that she was launching a new strategic framework for their private equity deals. My framework. She'd taken my white paper, polished the terminology, and delivered it as her own. Mom clapped. Dad beamed. No one asked where the idea came from. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter. That outcomes were what counted, and we shared blood, so a win for her was a win for us both. But the applause never came my way, not even a glance. That was when I realized what it meant to be invisible. Not ignored, erased. The hallway monitor dinged. A mechanical voice came over the speaker. "Candidate number 14, please report to the review panel." That was me. I stood, adjusted the collar of my shirt, and gripped my tote. I caught the eye of one of the women with the phone. Her smile faltered just a bit. If I'm their backup plan, I thought, they're going to regret not choosing me first. I walked through the door as if it were my office, because once it had been. The air inside the lounge smelled faintly of leather chairs and citrus-scented cleaner. There were ferns along the glass wall, placed with the kind of precision only a corporate designer would care about. But none of that was what caught me. It was him, Mr. Kalin. I hadn't seen him in nearly 7 years. He looked older, sure, a little heavier around the middle. His gray hair had thinned into a neat comb-over, but the warm glint in his eyes hadn't changed. He stood as soon as he saw me. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, not unkindly. "Didn't think we'd see you here again. Thought you moved on after, well, Boston." There it was, the myth Alexia had crafted. She'd rewritten my exit like a convenient footnote. Made it sound like I'd walked away when the pressure got too high. But Boston was where I stayed up 3 nights straight to fix a broken model Alexia greenlit too fast. I didn't leave. I was pushed out quietly with a handshake and a severance package she swore was generous. I forced a small smile. Surprised you remember me at all. He chuckled, then softened. Of course I remember. Hell, you were there when this place was duct tape and dreams. But funny thing, Alexia never mentioned you were part of the original strategy team. Always said she had some help early on, but I didn't realize it was you. That last part, he said gently, like he already knew. Before I could answer, the glass door slid open again. A younger man, probably an analyst, still shiny and eager, walked by, half looking at me. Oh, he muttered, loud enough to be heard. Didn't you used to screw up that pipeline model? He kept walking. Micah. I remembered his name now. He'd joined just before I left. I hadn't even trained him directly, but I knew where that lie came from. Alexia had repeated it enough times, it had become canon. What no one remembered was that I took the fall for her. She overpromised a delivery timeline to the board. I warned her it was too soon, and when it failed, I told the truth. I owned it, so the project wouldn't get pulled. People remember the failure. They never remember who actually caused it. I turned away from Micah and sat back down, keeping my face blank. My hands itched to pull up the real numbers, the timelines, the emails, but I didn't need to convince him. Not today. I needed to remember who I was. 5 years ago, in this very building, I had stood beside Alexia during a board presentation. My model, my slides, but her voice. She'd walked them through the framework with that same confident tone she used to talk her way into Wharton. Dad had sat in the second row. When the room erupted into applause, he clapped louder than anyone, and I'd swallowed it, all of it. I didn't ask for credit. I didn't whisper the truth to anyone. I told myself we're family. I told myself she needs this more than I do. I told myself it doesn't matter who gets the win, as long as the idea works. But silence eats you slowly. It drains your name from the mouths of those who should have protected it. Now, I was sitting in the same building, once again holding my own name in my hands like it was a secret. Out of instinct, I pulled up the Vireo Capital website on my phone, clicked to the Our Story tab. Founders, Alexia Durant, Peter Haynes, Malcolm Joyce, Ian Becker. I trained Peter. Malcolm used my onboarding strategy to land his first client. Ian shadowed me for 2 quarters before he was ever put on a call alone. But there they were, front and center. And me? I wasn't even listed under early contributors. I read it again, just to be sure. Nothing. They hadn't just replaced me. They erased me. Behind the frosted glass, a figure moved. A moment later, a voice called out, Kelsine, candidate 14. Mispronounced, again. I closed the notebook in my lap, this time slow and certain. When I stood, I didn't rush. I didn't fumble. I picked up my tote, straightened my shoulders, and when I walked through the next door, I said my name clearly, so no one could pretend they hadn't heard it right. They can rewrite the history all they want. I'm here to restore the truth. As I stepped into the boardroom, the hush was immediate. The air carried that sterile chill that clung to air-conditioned power, mixed with faint citrus polish and quiet judgment. The panel sat in a curved row at the far end, bathed in soft white light, all glass and steel, just like the version we once dreamed up on the back of diner napkins. Alexia was in the center naturally. She looked exactly how I remembered her when she was trying to appear composed but smug, polished blazer, severe bun, and lips curved just enough to mimic warmth without ever meaning it. She didn't stand. Instead, she tilted her head like someone admiring an old trophy they no longer had space for. "Ah, the late edition," she said, her voice breezy. "Candidate 14. Interesting profile." The others looked up as if on cue. A woman in a navy blouse gave a tight smile, then turned to flip through a resume in front of her. My resume, I assumed, without bothering to make eye contact. I didn't sit yet. Instead, I scanned the room. 12 chairs, 3 panelists, 1 nameplate at the end already flipped upside down. That spot had once been mine. I took my seat slowly, placing my tote on the floor with care. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I'd learned long ago that composure could make people nervous when they were hoping you'd crumble. The first question never came. Instead, halfway through the supposed introduction phase, the woman to Alexia's right, Vanessa, spoke with the kind of smile that tried to pass for kind but was just practiced. Unfortunately, Miss Durant, we've been discussing, and your background, while impressive, doesn't quite align with our leadership culture. I blinked. Not a single behavioral question, not a single skill challenge, not even a glance at the projects I'd built from scratch. Vanessa continued, tapping my resume. This just isn't the direction our brand's moving in. I kept my voice calm. That's strange. That resume helped launch your leadership culture. Vanessa glanced at Alexia for confirmation, like a freshman waiting for the teacher's nod. Alexia didn't look up. Let's be honest, Kelsey. We're looking for a voice that inspires confidence, not nostalgia. Not nostalgia, that was it. The framing. I wasn't here to be seen as capable. I was here to be archived, shelved next to old versions of policies they still used but didn't want to admit weren't their own. I could have yelled. I could have called her a liar to her face. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. Just so I understand, I said, my voice level, was the panel informed that one of the candidates helped write your compliance protocols? Alexia's hand, which had been tapping her pen against the armrest, paused. The room stilled. For a moment, it felt like no one wanted to breathe too loud. Vanessa blinked. Alexia gave a half shrug. We're here to evaluate future potential, not dwell on ancient contributions. Right, I said quietly, because nothing signals visionary, like rewriting your company's DNA and pretending it came from somewhere else. I stood, not to leave, but to retrieve something from my tote. From inside, I pulled a gray binder, worn at the edges, tabbed in color. I'd saved it for years, unsure why. Now I knew. I flipped to the final tab and removed a printout. The evaluation rubric I built, still dated, still signed by HR and one of the original co-founders. My initials printed at the bottom. The same rubric they were using today, slightly rebranded, but unmistakable. I laid it gently on the table. I didn't come here to apply, I said, looking Alexia in the eye. I came to see what you've become. This interview was never about my ability. You decided before I walked in. Her jaw tightened. I sat again, this time crossing one leg over the other. Folded my hands neatly in my lap. Vanessa leaned toward Alexia and whispered something. I caught one word. Security. Alexia didn't blink. She whispered back, but her lips barely moved. Not yet. Let's see how far she thinks she can go. My gaze flicked to her. For once, I let myself hold it there. You don't need security, I said softly. I'm not here to cause a scene. That was the truth. I didn't need volume. I had history, proof, receipts. I wasn't just a name off the list. They knew that now. They want to bury me quietly, I thought. Let's make some noise, without ever raising my voice. The silence that followed my last sentence didn't hang. It snapped. The kind of quiet where people stop breathing, not because they're afraid, but because they're watching for blood. Alexia didn't reply. She didn't have to. Instead, she tilted her head at the man seated farthest from her, one of the newer board members. David, I remembered. Harvard ring, blunt tone, power shoes. He reached into a folder and cleared his throat. Miss Durant, he said, we'd like to hear your perspective on scaling across emerging markets. A quick pitch, 2 minutes, just high level. I nodded. This was expected. The prompt was designed to show adaptability under pressure. I pulled my laptop from the tote and connected it to the HDMI cable laid across the table. The screen blinked, then filled with a garish title slide. Q2 Q4, Global Expansion, Risk-Averse Projections for Legacy Clients. I blinked. That wasn't my title. I flipped through the deck quickly, slide after slide of clashing fonts, numbers that didn't match, entire markets missing. Someone had altered my work, but not just ruined it, sabotaged it. A glance toward Alexia. She was reclined, one arm draped over the back of her chair, her fingers idly drumming a pattern on the table, eyes blank, like none of this had anything to do with her. I didn't react, not on the surface. Instead, I unplugged the cable, shut the laptop slowly, and looked David in the eye. "Apologies," I said calmly. "There's been a file corruption. Would it be all right if I walked through the strategy verbally?" David didn't respond. Vanessa, smiling without warmth, leaned over to pick up my resume from the table, then flicked it. On purpose. The pages skittered off the edge and landed on the floor beside my chair. "Well," she said, "I think we've seen enough." There was a small wave of quiet laughter, the kind you get when people are waiting to see if it's okay to mock someone. I stayed standing, bent down, picked up the pages one by one, straightened them out with deliberate care, and then I stood tall. 5 years ago, I'd been in Tokyo, in a room filled with skeptics, all men. None spoke a word of English when I arrived. I had delivered a 40-minute pitch entirely in Japanese, while Alexia had smirked from the sidelines, telling a colleague afterward, "It'll be adorable if she tries." That project became the firm's biggest Asian contract to date. I never got credit. She gave the interview. She accepted the award. I never forgot. "Since we're short on time," I said now, plugging in my backup USB, "I'll skip the visuals." I didn't wait for permission. I turned to face them, 3 people who thought they could unseat me from something I'd built. I propose a 3-tiered entry model. Market sequencing begins with 2 soft maturity economies, Kenya and Vietnam, before leveraging digital asset pivots into mid-tier European partnerships. Vanessa stopped taking notes after the first 20 seconds. David shifted in his seat, frowning slightly. He'd worked in Berlin. He knew what I just said made sense. I kept going. Lean, exact. No fluff, no filler. When I finished, I didn't ask, "Any questions?" I just returned to my seat. Alexia finally moved. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" she murmured. I looked at her and smiled, small, unbothered. "That's what makes me dangerous." Before she could reply, a phone buzzed, a vibration on the conference table. All heads turned. The glass door behind us opened. Cyrus, the CEO's assistant, stepped in, holding a manila folder and an expression that didn't match the tension in the room. He looked amused. My heart didn't skip. It steadied. They want to erase me with laughter, I thought. Let's see how they handle facts. I didn't speak to Cyrus as I stepped past him. His eyes followed me, that folder still in hand, but he didn't call out. He didn't need to. I was already on my way out of the boardroom. The hallway smelled of coffee and overused perfume. My heels clicked softly on the polished concrete as I walked back toward the waiting lounge. A few candidates stood around, others seated. Their conversation paused the moment they saw me. Whispers spread, a few subtle glances toward the wall-mounted screen. I turned my head. There it was, a video loop of me 10 minutes earlier, struggling to fix my sabotaged presentation. Frozen frames of my laptop flickering, hands slightly trembling, lips pressing shut. The caption was in bold white font, Legacy LOL. The laughter wasn't audible on the clip, but the text did enough damage. It had been posted on the company's internal Slack channel, an anonymous drop, but I knew how this worked. Metadata doesn't lie, and the watermark on the bottom right? That was an IP tag used exclusively by executive offices. Alexia's floor. I stood there, just long enough for them to think I'd flinch. Then I walked to the water cooler, filled a small paper cup, took a sip, and turned away from the screen like it meant nothing. But I was already counting the steps to the IT desk in the back corner of the building. Riley was on duty, mid-30s, tech-literate, always polite. He'd once helped build the internal compliance network with me, long before HR even knew what an IP filter was. I smiled. "Hey, Riley, could you do me a favor?" His brow furrowed a little. "Depends. What's up?" "Can you pull the login metadata for the Slack channel team banter from this morning? I need timestamps and device IDs, and cross-check with the 4th floor static terminals." He didn't ask why. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. I nodded and walked out without looking back. While Riley did his part, I walked through the corridor, found a quiet corner, pulled out my phone, and opened the audio vault. There it was. The voice memo I hadn't listened to in over a year. A clipped, wine-blurred admission from Alexia at a company retreat in Napa. "I wouldn't have pulled off Tokyo without your market model. You're the brain. I'm just the packaging." She laughed after that. The kind of laugh people don't remember saying out loud, unless someone recorded it. I saved the file under a new name, foundingcredit_confession.mp3. Then I opened my email. Wrote a subject line, interview follow-up, IP violation and co-founder dispute, to CEO at Vireo, HR legal at Vireo, board chair at Vireo attached, voice memo, PDF summary of Tokyo project origins, my draft white paper with timestamp. The body of the email was one line. If clarity is still a value here, I suggest listening through to the end. I hit send. By the time I stepped back into the lounge, the video had been taken down from the screen. Too late. People still stared, but no one said a word. I sat down at the edge of the room, unzipped my tote, and pulled out a merger case study I'd brought. It was outdated, irrelevant to today's process. But I opened it anyway, flipped pages slowly, made light pencil marks. I wanted them to see me read, like none of it touched me, because some fights are won in silence. My phone buzzed once. Cyrus, you'll want to be near the boardroom in 15. The chair asked for a copy of your founding documents. I smiled, just enough to let the tension in my jaw release. They wanted to humiliate me in the hallway, I thought. Let's finish this in the boardroom. I rose from the lounge chair without a word. I tucked the case study back into my tote, slipped my phone into the side pocket, and walked with measured steps toward the west wing, toward the boardroom Cyrus had mentioned. The hallway stretched ahead, flanked by frosted glass offices. Every pane reflected just enough of me to remind myself I was still here. I was whole, and I was done hiding behind what used to be. Cyrus met me by the elevator bay, folder in hand, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he ended the call without saying goodbye. "They're ready," he said quietly. He didn't smile this time. His voice was low, respectful, as if he'd read the email, as if he'd heard the memo. He opened the door to the smaller executive boardroom, one normally reserved for partner summits and closed-door reviews. It was quiet inside, blinds drawn. The air was cool, the lighting deliberate. The table seated 8. 4 board members were present. One chair sat empty, pushed back slightly, the CEO's. Cyrus gestured to the USB port at the far end. I walked over and plugged in my drive. The screen behind me lit up. First, the incorporation file, the founding charter for Vireo Capital, the seal of the state, the date, my name, printed, signed and certified beneath the title, Co-founder, Strategic Division. Cyrus tapped the remote and the next image loaded. The same document, cropped and rebranded for Vireo's current website. The section bearing my name, missing. Someone had literally clipped the signature block. No name, no acknowledgement. Just Alexia, listed alone with 3 other men, one of whom I'd hired. The room didn't gasp, but it froze. Vanessa, seated near the end, crossed her arms and leaned back. "That was an early draft," she said, a bit too quickly. "The records were updated later. Alexia's team handled the formal submission." I took a breath, reached into my bag and pulled out a printed email. I laid it flat on the table in front of them, turned so they could read. The subject line, "Backup candidate to stall HR." It was a forward from Alexia, months before this interview. My resume attached. No context, no recommendation, just that one damning subject. "She never meant for me to be part of this," I said, steady. She needed time to secure her own pick. I was insurance. A murmur, a shifting of weight in chairs. I continued. Next slide. The network logs, Slack access, upload timestamps, all traced to a single device under Alexia's login. The clip, the caption, Legacy LOL, every pixel sourced from her office. Final file, the voice memo. I didn't play it aloud. I just held up the printout of the transcript. "She said it herself," I said. "Tokyo wouldn't have happened without my model. But none of that shows up in the interviews she's given since." Vanessa opened her mouth again, but Cyrus cut her off with a slight shake of his head. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "This is a pattern. This is someone who needed to erase the past to justify the version of power she wanted." That's when the door behind me opened. The CEO walked in, calm, tie slightly loosened as if he'd come from another meeting. He gave me a nod, brief but direct, and moved toward the head of the table. I reviewed the files, he said. He pulled his own access token from his jacket, inserted it into the terminal, and opened a folder from the company's secure archive. The shareholder ledger, original format. He tapped a key. Line 3, Kelsey M. Royce, founding partner, 30% stake. His finger traced a timeline on the screen. 3 years ago, he said, this was transferred. During a platform migration recommended by Alexia, there was no board vote, no consent file, no explanation logged. He turned slowly, looking at each face in the room. This wasn't just a clerical error, he said. This was betrayal. No one argued. The silence wasn't respect, it was recognition. Alexia finally stood. Her voice caught the first syllable, then failed to land. The CEO raised a hand. Miss Royce, he said formally, please wait outside. The board will deliberate with Chairwoman Kelsey present. She blinked. Once, twice. But she didn't protest. She walked out without another word. I didn't smile. I sat, opened my notebook, clicked my pen, and began writing again. Not to defend myself, but to record what came next. They erased my name from the history. Now, I'm writing the future, in pen. The boardroom stayed still for a long breath after Alexia stepped out. Her heels clicked down the hallway like punctuation marks, but no one moved until the door eased shut behind her. Cyrus stood to my left, waiting. He glanced once at the chairman's seat, then back at me. I nodded barely, and he walked out. The silence broke with the sound of approaching shoes, measured, unhurried. The CEO returned. He wasn't flanked by security or assistants now. He came in alone, shoulders squared, chin lifted. As he stepped toward the head of the table, his eyes didn't drift. He was coming straight for me. Every person in that room tracked his steps, but none more intently than I did. When he stopped in front of me, he didn't shake my hand. He bowed. Not a nod, not a lean, a bow from the waist, slow, complete. A gesture you rarely see in American boardrooms, a gesture of recognition. When he straightened, his voice rang out. Chairwoman Kelsey Royce, he said clearly. We failed you, but not again. Gasps followed, one from someone behind the glass wall, another from the hallway. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. He had just rewritten what Alexia spent years trying to erase. From the corner of the room, Cyrus stepped forward. He held the same manila folder he'd carried earlier, but this time he didn't place it on the table. He held it to his chest and said, When I was blacklisted from the industry, when no one else would take my resume, return my messages, Kelsey Royce picked up the phone. He turned to the executive handbook lying open on the table. That playbook? The one we've used for 5 years to shape culture and hire talent? She wrote it. Alexia just rebranded the fonts and put her initials on it. One of the board members leaned in toward another. I didn't catch all of it, but the words legal risk and career ending cut clearly enough through the hush. The CEO didn't interrupt. He let Cyrus speak, then he turned to the table, scanned the room, and said plainly, This board will now move forward with disciplinary review, effective immediately. He looked to the security team, standing silent near the exit. Alexia Royce is to surrender all credentials. Access is revoked. They nodded and walked out, earpieces in place. David and Vanessa, he added without emotion, you're dismissed from today's proceedings pending further inquiry into your roles in the interview process. David stood, stiff, lips tight. Vanessa tried to say something about misunderstanding policy, but the CEO waved it off. He pointed to the screen behind me. A message had appeared. Internal audit commencing. Phase 1. Recruitment fraud. A few candidates outside the door began murmuring. One woman looked directly at me through the glass, eyes wide. I stood. Not because someone told me to, because I wanted to. I walked to the front of the room, past the empty seat where Alexia had once held court, and placed a single page on the table. It was old. The paper had curled edges, faint blue ink on a printed rubric, my first draft of the company's recruitment matrix. This, I said calmly, was built on merit. No filters, no last names, no back channels, just skill and fit. I didn't shout, I didn't plead. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being a tool, I continued. You turned it into a mirror, so that every time you looked into it, you only saw what made you feel comfortable. I looked at the CEO. I'm proposing a change, not for the press, not to clean house, but to build something cleaner than before. I pulled another page from my tote. Crisp, typed in black. The Royce Standard. A new policy framework. Anonymous applications, blind screening, zero tolerance for nepotism or retaliation. It landed with a soft thud. The applause didn't come immediately. It wasn't the kind of moment you clap for. It was the kind you breathe through. And then slowly, hands met hands, one by one, measured, sincere. I didn't bask in it. I didn't raise my chin. I stood still, because truth doesn't need celebration. It needs room. The boardroom began to empty, quietly, respectfully. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Papers gathered. Phones slipped into pockets. As the door closed behind the last member, Cyrus lingered. He didn't speak right away, just watched me as I folded the rubric back into my tote. Then, with that slight smirk I remembered from our early days in Tokyo, he asked, "Are you ready to return to the chair?" I zipped the tote. "No," I said gently. "I'm ready to rebuild it." He nodded once, then walked out, and for the first time all day, I let myself rest both palms on the table. They bowed, but I didn't rise for them. I rose for the ones who never got the chance. The boardroom didn't look any different that morning, but everything about it had changed. Same walls, dark walnut with precise inlays, same custom table, long, sleek, unnervingly perfect. The same chairs, same subtle hum from the recessed lights overhead. And yet, the air felt different. Not tense, not charged, just vacant. It was the kind of stillness that comes after something breaks and no one picks up the pieces. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how. Or maybe because they're afraid of what they'll find once they do. I walked in alone, no assistant at my side, no laptop weighing down my shoulder. My tote bag felt nearly weightless. I'd only brought one thing with me, and it wasn't business-related. There, placed neatly at the head of the table, was an envelope. Thick stock paper, the kind that carries a quiet seriousness. Off-white, tinged slightly yellow at the edges. My name written on the front in blue ink, the loop of the R in Royce unmistakable. It was my father's handwriting. I hesitated before sitting. Then slowly I pulled out the chair, settled into it, and opened the flap. Inside was a single folded letter. It was dated nearly 2 years before he died. I had no idea he'd written something like this. Not to me, not about anything that mattered. The first line was simple. "Kelsey, if you're reading this, then I didn't say enough while I still had the chance." From there, the words rolled forward like a tide I hadn't expected. He remembered things, specific things. The Tokyo pitch, where I had to fight twice as hard just to be heard. The board dinner when Alexia cut in and claimed credit for the entire development plan I'd spent 6 months building. He saw it happen, he knew, and he hadn't said a word. "I thought," he wrote, "that letting Alexia lead would settle the tension between you. I believed staying neutral might help you both work it out. I didn't realize until later that silence could be its own form of betrayal." He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't pleading. He was simply telling the truth, the way he hadn't when I needed him to. "Peace that comes at your expense," he said, "was never peace at all. I should have spoken up. I should have defended you, not just as a father, but as someone who saw what you built and understood the cost." I stopped reading for a moment. My fingers held the letter delicately, the edge pressed against my thumb. My chest was calm, no tears, not even now. He ended it with a line that struck harder than anything else. "I hope one day you forgive me for not speaking when it counted. But more than that, I hope you never silence yourself to make others more comfortable." I folded the letter carefully, smoothed out the creases, slipped it back into its envelope. Then I crossed the room to a cabinet marked Founder's Legacy. I opened it, placed the envelope inside, and turned the brass key until it clicked shut. It didn't feel like closure, that overused word people cling to. It felt more like an honest footnote, something to keep the past from being rewritten into something easier, something less true. Outside the boardroom, the office was already moving again. Muffled conversations echoed down the halls. Phones buzzed. The light overhead hummed steadily, as if nothing had changed. I walked through the lobby with no announcement, no last-minute meeting, no press release. A few heads turned. Some staff looked away quickly. Others watched openly, their eyes trailing me to the elevator. At the front door, Cyrus caught up with me. He held the glass door open and leaned slightly in. "You're not staying?" he asked. I gave him a small smile. "I didn't come back to stay," I said. "I came to fix what we broke." He didn't argue, just nodded once and stepped back inside. Outside, the morning air felt cooler, clearer. I flagged down a cab, gave the driver an address in Brooklyn, and leaned back against the seat. For the first time in a long time, my body didn't feel coiled. My breath moved easily. A week later, I was home. Really home. The backyard wasn't much, just a small garden with some basil, rosemary, and lavender. A few clay pots lined the edge of the fence, but it was enough. My niece, Alexia's daughter, was visiting. She didn't know all the details, just that Aunt Kelsey had been away handling something grown up and serious. Now I was back. She ran barefoot through the sprinkler, shrieking with laughter, arms stretched out like wings. I sat on the porch steps, a cup of tea in one hand and a worn leather notebook in the other. The cover read, "Founders Fellowship." It was empty, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. It would hold names, stories, young women with ideas but no connections, drive but no roadmap, girls like I had once been, before titles, before betrayals, before I learned how to be quiet when I should have fought louder. This notebook would be their place to begin. When I left the boardroom that day, I didn't take anything with me, but I left everything in place. There's a moment in life when you stop waiting for applause and start building something that matters. Not for recognition, but for restoration. I didn't fight to sit at their table again. I built a new one, with space for the voices they tried to silence, mine included. If this story sounds familiar to you, maybe it's because you've watched someone else take credit for your work. Or you've stayed silent for the sake of keeping peace. Maybe you've questioned whether speaking up was even worth it. Let me say this clearly. It is, but only when you speak from truth, not vengeance. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to be ready when it's finally your turn. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a room where your name didn't get the credit it deserved? Or maybe you're someone who's finally finding your voice, even after all these years. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you. Or let me know, where are you watching from today? And if you didn't like this video, that's okay too. Tell me why, and let's talk about it. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories about resilience, truth, and second chances, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next one might just be your story too. Thank you for being here. Let's keep building what matters.